Welcome to MoneyWise, the educational podcast where we dive deep into financial insights and global trends. In today's episode, we're unpacking a topic that's been making waves across the globe, the BRICS Summit 2025. This year's summit is expected to bring major discussions on global finance, economic power shifts, and alternative financial systems. BRICS is no longer just a group of emerging economies. It's becoming a key player in shaping the future of global trade and investment. We'll explore key highlights such as BRICS's plans to create an alternative to the US dollar, the new developments in their shared financial infrastructure, and the geopolitical implications of their actions. This year's summit focused on fostering greater collaboration among BRICS member nations, while offering solutions to some of the world's most pressing economic issues. But will this challenge the dominance of the US dollar? That's exactly what we're diving into today. Stay tuned as we explore the rise of BRICS, its global ambitions, and its potential to reshape international finance. Let's get started. Today, we have an expert in international finance with us to help unpack all things BRICS. Welcome, and let's dive right in. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is BRICS, and what does the acronym stand for?
A fact. Thanks for having me. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's a group of 5 major emerging economies that represent a significant portion of the world's population, land mass, and economic activity. The group was originally known as BRIC before South Africa joined in 2010.
That's a great breakdown. So it's clear that BRICS represent some of the world's fastest growing economies. But what motivated these nations to come together in the first place? What was the driving force behind the establishment of this group?
BRICS was formed to provide an alternative to the traditional global financial institutions dominated by Western powers, such as the IMF and the World Bank. For example, countries like Brazil and India felt that the traditional global financial systems didn't fully represent their interests, particularly when it came to development loans and trade agreements. So BRICS was created to promote economic development, trade, and investment, and give emerging markets a stronger voice on the global stage.
That's a fascinating point. So BRICS is essentially pushing for a more equitable financial system where emerging economies have a bigger say, given that there's been a lot of talk about BRICS possibly challenging the dominance of the US dollar. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think BRICS has the potential to replace the US dollar as the global reserve currency?
Well, it's not so simple. While BRICS has certainly been working on creating an alternative financial infrastructure, like their own development bank and talk of a new currency, replacing the US dollar completely would take a significant shift in global financial systems. Take China, for instance. They've been pushing for the use of the yuan in international trade, and there have been some countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia that have started to settle oil trades in yuan instead of dollars. However, replacing the dollar entirely would take a lot more than just a few countries opting for alternatives.
That's a valid point. The transition to an alternative currency would certainly be a monumental shift. But considering all the global movements we're seeing, do you think the US dollar is truly at risk? Could we see its dominance starting to fade, or is it too entrenched in the global system to be easily displaced?
That's a great question. The US dollar has certainly faced challenges over the years. For example, after the 2008 financial crisis, there was significant discussion about whether the US dollar would lose its dominance. But even then, the dollar rebounded because the US economy is deeply tied to global markets. Now, countries like Russia and China are seeking alternatives, especially in light of sanctions and geopolitical tensions. Russia has even stopped using the dollar for some of its key trade deals. But despite this, the dollar remains strong due to its liquidity, stability, and the size of the U.S. economy.
Exactly. So it sounds like BRICS is more about offering alternatives than outright replacing the US dollar. But with that in mind, what kind of alternatives are we seeing? For example, are there specific initiatives or strategies that BRICS is pursuing to strengthen these alternatives, like a common currency or enhanced financial infrastructure?
Exactly. BRICS is positioning itself as a counterbalance, offering alternatives to the dollar dominated financial system. For example, China's Belt and Road Initiative is an effort to promote trade using local currencies between participating countries. This allows for more trade without relying on the US dollar. BRICS, in essence, is giving countries more options and challenging the global financial system's dependence on a single currency.
That makes sense. So BRICS is positioning itself as a counterbalance, offering alternatives rather than trying to replace the US dollar completely. You mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative, promoting local currencies in trade. How widespread is this shift? Are we seeing more countries adopting these alternatives, or is it still mostly limited to a few key players like China and Russia? And speaking of that, could you highlight which countries are leading the way in moving away from the US dollar in their trade deals?
Yes, absolutely. Countries like Russia, China, and Iran have been vocal about their intent to reduce reliance on the dollar. For instance, China has been working with countries like Brazil and Argentina to settle trade in their local currencies instead of the dollar. And in 2018, Russia and China agreed to use their own currencies in their trade deals. In Africa, countries like Kenya and Egypt are also exploring alternatives to the dollar for trade with China. This shift is not just about financial transactions, it's also about geopolitical influence. Countries want to reduce their exposure to US sanctions and gain more control over their financial sovereignty.
That's really insightful. So, we're seeing countries like Russia, China, and even those in Africa, such as Kenya and Egypt, exploring alternatives to the US dollar. Beyond the financial side, you mentioned geopolitical influence. How do these moves affect global power dynamics? And as BRICS continues to grow, should we expect more disruptions in the global economic order? What's your take on where the future of BRICS is headed?
Absolutely. BRICS is positioning itself as a key player in shaping the future of global finance. As countries within BRICS like China, Russia, and India take on larger roles in global trade, infrastructure, projects, and development loans, we're seeing a clear shift toward diversification in the financial system. For example, the rise of digital currencies and the move towards settling trade in local currencies, such as China and Russia's efforts to use the yuan and ruble, are undermining the dollar's traditional dominance in trade agreements. This growing multipolarity in finance is not just about financial transactions, it's also a response to geopolitical tensions, with countries seeking more autonomy and less dependence on Western dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank. While it's unlikely that the US dollar will be replaced overnight, we're certainly moving toward a more diverse global financial system where multiple currencies and economic powers share influence. The next decade will be crucial as BRICS and other emerging economies continue to challenge the old guard. These shifts could redefine how global trade is conducted and reshape economic alliances, signaling the end of the era where the dollar and Western powers held exclusive sway.
Such an insightful discussion today. It's clear that BRICS is positioning itself as a major force in global finance, and as we've seen, the next few years will be pivotal in reshaping the financial landscape. From the rise of digital currencies and local currency trade to the growing geopolitical influence of emerging economies, that these changes will have lasting effects on how global trade is conducted. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing their expertise and shedding light on these crucial developments. To our audience, thank you for tuning in for this educational discussion. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to MoneyWise to stay informed on the latest financial trends and how these global shifts might shape your financial future. Until next time, stay informed, stay ahead, and take care.